آتش زد به هستی من، روی چو گلشن تو هر لحظه به دیده من. اگر چشمت زیبا بود، قشنگتر از هر رویا بود. به جان من چون آتش بود، آی آتش بود. به خرمن جان افتادی ای عشقت بهانه من. آتش زد به هستی من، عشق تو تا ابد در وجود من. نام تو هر زمان بر لبان من. می تپد قلبم با شنیدن نامت هر دم. گشت لبریز از مهرت سینم. شد بهار خزان عمر من ز عشق و شکوه تو.
Veranda of Ramadan. Dr. Mohammad Ali Taheri. Since the dawn of humanity on planet Earth, these two questions have not stopped engaging his mind. Who am I? And who is the Creator? The subsequent questions, following the former, were where do I come from? Why do I exist? And where am I heading for? However, the concern about the Creator was centered at the very heart of this quest, as long as the spontaneous desire to worship was one of his inherent needs, which over time led to many gods being chosen during the course of history. The next step was the act of worshipping, to which certain times and places were dedicated. Thus altars and temples for worshipping fire and other gods were erected. In addition, worshipping the sun, moon, etc. on appointed days is why days of the week are named after them, such as Sunday, Monday, etc. Gradually, among some tribes, any form of activity other than spiritual ones were banned on these days, which were known as God's Day. That is why this particular point of view was legislated as a religious decree in the Old Testament, and generally, through the Guide of Religions, Saturdays for Jews, Sundays for Christians and Fridays for Muslims were consecrated and were dedicated to spiritual rituals with slight differences. Hence, some months were declared banned. Moreover, in the ancient civilizations, for each of the religious rituals certain days during the year were appointed, some of which turned into a national culture with the passage of time. Among those, Nowruz, New Year, in ancient Persia can be mentioned, which was allocated to bonding with nature. Nevertheless, during the course of history, through man's wisdom and divine conduct, specific rites and rituals were formed in every nation, which served as the spiritual drive. Thus, all were carried out in rituals, including Sadeh and Mergan festivities, and the 40 days long prayer of Musavi Shelle, a period of 40 days, aiming to provide the chance to elevate the self and sanctified the corresponding times. According to the aforementioned examples, down through centuries, human was aware of the fact that not all his time should be dedicated to doing routines and earthly efforts, and as a result, deprive himself of the spiritual blessing. Particularly, digging deep to the roots of each of these rites and rituals in all divine religions proves the fact that they were all destined to help mankind reach enlightenment and a beneficial revolution in himself, and that none could serve as a means of attaining the satisfaction of a God in need to be worshipped. In these religions, human success and failure in ascending the path of perfection are respectively equivalent to God's satisfaction and discontent. In simple terms, spiritual rites are a means to knowing one's own self and also God, which is beneficent for him, and neglecting them or ignoring their essence, superficial observance of them, will be nothing but great loss. One of the holy times in Islam which is dedicated to self-renewal and fasting is recommended so that human would attain divine blessing is the holy month of Ramadan. Fasting has been prevalent among the religious since antiquity, and some of its advantages will be explored later. However, the crucial point here is that the blessing of this holy month does not merely lie in abstaining from eating and drinking, but in the realization of Ramadan. Ramadan is, in the first place, a particular condition, not a special time. In Arabic literature, Ramadan is the tense radiation emitted from the sun, and although it was probably named after the zenith of the sun's heat due to its concomitance with Ramadan in Saudi Arabia, it can also be inferred that Ramadan also means the intense light of divinity. The most significant outcome of this blessing is illumination and hindsight, especially that of God's omnipresence. This realization comes in different degrees, and in the history of Islam, the first man to achieve the pinnacle of Ramadan was Muhammad the Prophet, who after an inward revolution and elimination of the self in the spiritual being attained an understanding which culminated in wholly perceiving the Holy Quran. Thus, it rendered Ramadan a spiritual reputation, and gave all the others the lesson that they can experience their own Ramadan in this month, or in other words, likewise his Ramadan which brought about such achievement in this month. Everyone can strive for a valid spiritual change in their own life. Ramadan is a memento and also an opportunity for obtaining spectacular divine blessing. The ones eager to have personal changes are categorized into some groups, only one of which will accomplish in fully comprehending Ramadan. 1. Self-centered. The ones pursuing their personal goals and solely depend on their own efforts. 2. Self-centered, God-centered. The ones pursuing their personal goals through means of God's help. 3. God-centered, self-centered. They aim at drawing closer to God. However, they seek their own attempts rather than God's. 4. God-centered. They aim at the very same thing, but He is also how they succeed in doing so. The fourth group will indeed reach the summit of spirituality, which is immersing the self in the One. Thus, because they have departed from the earthly qualities, their look will be that of God's, their words will be that of God's, and so forth. All prophets, having scriptures, were amongst them, and others may as well be able to comprehend the traces of God-centered insight. Ramadan provides the setting for this fabulous step forward and mighty understanding, and is counted holy from this particular perspective. Understanding and insight are the reasons of faith. Based on this and regarding Holy Quran's advice, have faith, thou the ones who believed, it could be inferred that Ramadan strengthens faith among the ones eager to take all chances during this holy month. Reaching the second level of faith is God's forgiveness, and being deprived of that is equivalent to being bereft of amnesty. On the other hand, the genuine Ramadan prevents the devil from penetrating humans' being. A direct look towards God, not deviated to any other direction, provide the greatest refuge from all devils, and in other words, being focused on God is being complied with the divine which keeps the devil at bay. A point to be mentioned is that the rise in spiritual attention in a society, which can take place at certain times, is the source of a communal influence, meaning that if a number of people within a society direct their attention towards God, according to a combination of rules which are called the collective soul, a more propitious groundwork for spiritual growth will be provided for others. It could be maintained that similar to the sale season, which is just the good time for transacting, and it is regarded as auspicious, in Ramadan, which alone does not differ from the other months, the harmonious atmosphere of welfare, benefaction, and the quest to approach God will spread divine grace and benediction according to God's aid is with all. From this point of view, Ramadan is full of benefits for those who strive for perfection and maturity, and void of any benediction for those who do not take this spectacular opportunity, or even at times tortuous. For gracious God, who is not restrained to time and space, no place and time is of any discrepancy, and it is man's deed which renders sanctity to a place and time. A place dedicated to praying spiritually turns into a place in which the wine of love and enlightenment are obtained from the divine wisdom's grail, and when exposed to the influence of the collective soul of spirituality, finds special divine properties. However, the person's will to reach grace through such times and places is definitive. Fasting is one of the means which paves the way in Ramadan. In old civilizations, eye fasting, tongue fasting, thought fasting, etc., had invited man to abandon his habits related to eyes, loss and thoughts. In the last religion, also, fasting plays a crucial role for doing so. From this perspective, fasting is a means of refining conceptual aspects of human beings, which wipes out all belongings in order to lead him towards neutrality, and also, in addition to this internal and conceptual aspect, it helps the arrangement of humans' programs to be modified and renovated through abandoning conspicuous habits such as eating and drinking, which are followed 11 months of the year. Taking the capacity of humankind of being resilient into account, the majority of people is somehow considered addicts and need to adjust their notional and behavioral pattern. From this point of view, Ramadan is the rehabilitation period. The harms of addiction can be divided into two categories. One is that getting accustomed to deeds which nurture spiritual growth reduces their value and effect, and in general makes one dependent upon the deeds themselves, prevents him from paying attention to the Creator, and also getting used to anything afflicts humans' programs to a defective informational cycle, which is utterly deleterious to his being. Human being is like Zahak, and the serpents on his shoulders are his mind and psyche. If these two serpents would not be fed with the required cuisine, which is not how they are expected to, they will torture him. Fasting causes all these conditional programs to vanish, if such, ergo, which means avoiding the endurance of the habit and the formation of the defective informational cycle. The existence of such an incompetent cycle within his complex and interwoven frameworks creates pores, and these pores will serve as gates to inorganic beings. The other advantage of fasting is related to its social influences. According to religious teachings, fasting is regarded as body's zakat. Zakat is a kind of transaction with nature, and according to that, it becomes necessary to give back a part of, or that which is related to what has been taken from universe. Therefore, zakat will be dedicated to thoughts, property, mental and intellectual maturity, and all that has been bestowed upon us. The body's zakat is that, in return for our need for food being eliminated during a year, a part of a month's food, 30 meals, should be allocated to the poor, and thus the body's health would be maintained. As a result, for the one who has not had a look at society for 11 months, Ramadan is the best opportunity to take a good glance at it, to which he owes, and spend a certain amount of his share on it. Following this social aspect of fasting, a fragment of the poor's right from the rich's property will be obtained. In the past, when human societies inhabited villages or small cities, all had some forms of communication with each other, and the poor and the hungry were more taken care after. This interaction was the source of equilibrium within the society and rescued it from being subject to envy. Envy in a society affects all individuals, and its feedback in the collective soul also deprives the rich from having a sense of satisfaction. Therefore, The significance of sociological and psychological study of fasting is undeniable. Moreover, the religious teachings such as lying in the name of God, which invalidates fasting, are among the greatest lessons, pursuing which leads fasting to noticeable spiritual ends. If we know the meaning of God, and acknowledge that every fragment of being is one of the names of God, it then becomes crystal clear that profaning all these pieces and denying their divinity could be taken as lying in the name of God. If humans' insight is modified according to this belief, and fasting throughout this month is not limited to abstaining from eating and drinking, his life will be set on the right path, and if not, Ramadan will be of no difference from other months of the years. Another noteworthy point about Ramadan is Qadar night. This night is the mass center, sine qua non, quintessential part of Ramadan. The one who has not attained self-knowledge lives in the darkness of the night of ignorance. Human has been placed in this darkness in order to lead himself to the light and gratitude towards the whole cosmos and his being. So, his prophecy is to render himself to light from darkness, and finding the way towards light manifests his art. Recognizing one's own value and that of the whole being culminates in understanding the divine magnitude, and it has to be achieved in the heart of darkness. It is referred to when God speaks to angels, "Am aware of that which you are not." The water of life is the divine awareness which shows the path towards light and brings about well-being of thought and soul, accomplishing which requires humans' connection as a part with God's kingdom, the higher universe as the whole. Ramadan provides the demanding condition for reaching magnitude, and due to this, it is embedded within Ramadan. However, it is important to point out that every second of day or night could be man's night of gratitude, whether it takes place in Ramadan or other months, because it is when one comprehends his dignity and that of all existence and comes to an understanding of divine magnitude. Nevertheless, the reason behind specifying a night of this month as the night of gratitude is that reaching it is the pinnacle of all the goals to be achieved in this month. Hence, all mankind is reminded of their own night of gratitude at least once a year at Mohammed the Prophet. Ramadan can ready man for mutation, and the one who has abandoned his habits and belongings during Ramadan is more prepared for such mutation. And there are chances of him reaching his night of gratitude throughout this month. From the point of astronomical position, Ramadan and the night of gratitude travel through all seasons and days, which indicates one should not confine himself to a specific time in order to reach the revolution he awaits. Being confined to a particular time is one of devil's deceits, if it leads to squandering away all other times, in order to letting us assume that it is the only night offering divine grace. Therefore, most of us who seize the dawn of the next day through this night and do not reach any specific conclusion, lose our hopes until the next night of gratitude and spend our lives in ignorance until the following year, and probably for years and years to come, lose all opportunities throughout Ramadans. Whereas, the truth is, Ramadan and the night of gratitude are all chances for us to attain our own Ramadan and the night of gratitude through the means of the collective soul's blessing. But do not limit such achievement to themselves. To conclude, if days and nights passed without any tangible insight which was supposed to be achieved, it should not be assumed that it is impossible at other times.